Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Do you want to give Lily and Nick your whole self? Nick and Lily's chemistry was put to the test a while back, and fans haven't stopped thinking about it ever since. On The Young and the Restless, Lily and Nick had previously undergone chemistry testing. The audience realized it, and some of them haven't forgotten about it since. While Lily is grieving the loss of Damien and attempting to keep her relationship with her ex-husband, Nick, amicable, Nick recently appeared to make amends with Sharon. Fans questioned if Nick would make a sexy or cold coupling, though. The original Reddit poster claimed that Nick and Lily would make a great couple. Because Victor would either adore them or despise them, it might create for a complicated and interesting plot. He always has a say in who his children date, as we all know. Given that Lily was married to her son, Daniel, this would potentially cause friction with Phyllis, who shared her favorite Y&R sequences. She would undoubtedly be able to influence Lily's decision to date her ex. If Devon found out that Nick was seeing his sister, he would not be pleased. According to some, Nick would do better with Sharon or Phyllis. Boring, one person wrote. She is dull around everyone. His best with Phyllis, in my opinion. With her, he appears to be his true self. He's always busy protecting Sharon from herself. Sharon. I think it's a terrible storyline, another person commented. Why do people continue to pair Lily with guys who are in a relationship with someone else? Stop. More times than we can count, Lily has been betrayed. She requires a partner who is totally committed to her. Whether he likes to acknowledge it or not, Nick will be stuck between two women for the rest of his life. Years ago, Nick and Lily flirted with one another. The soap didn't accompany them, even though they seemed to click. However, a random coupling cannot occur suddenly. For the combination to be interesting, a strong plot is required. Something sad or shocking might draw them together, in my opinion. It usually goes like that, someone wrote. Yes, I do recall the time they had a scene at a pub with Lily and Nick in 2017, and it seemed like she was making out with him. Another person said, but then it went nowhere, and I was so disappointed. However, the majority of fans can't help but recall Lily's childhood friendship with his daughter Cassie. Most fans become annoyed just by this. Some admirers desire them together despite their apparent age difference. They chemistry tested Nick and Lily more than 10 years ago, and there were sparks, someone said. It was a mistake for the show to do nothing with them. What do you think? Are you a fan of Nick and Lily? Please share your thoughts in the comments box below. Nick and Lily's potential pairing has been simmering beneath the surface of The Young and the Restless for years, never quite igniting into a full-fledged romance but always leaving behind the embers of what might have been. And now, as discussions about whether Lily should give Nick her whole self resurface among fans, the idea has once again captured the imagination of viewers who remember every lingering glance, every hint of flirtation, every almost moment between these two characters who, despite being tethered to other love stories, other tragedies, and other obligations, still share a certain undeniable spark that refuses to be extinguished. After all, Nick Newman, son of the ever-dominant Victor Newman, has always carried the burden of balancing who he wants to be with the expectations placed on him by his family, while Lily Winters, the resilient daughter of the late Drusilla and Neil, has carved out her identity in the shadow of grief, betrayal, and a lifetime of being expected to rise above the chaos that has too often engulfed her. So when fans recall the chemistry test that occurred years ago between Nick and Lily, they are not simply conjuring up some fleeting soap opera whim but rather recognizing a moment when two characters who had endured so much separately were given the chance to share the screen in a way that hinted at something layered, something deeper, something more than just a passing crush. Because in Lily and Nick, there is not just chemistry, but history. And history in Genoa City is never something to be ignored, especially when it involves a Newman and a Winters. Yet, the obstacle to their union doesn't just lie in whether they could make a compelling couple on paper but in the web of interconnected relationships that make soaps what they are. Lily, who was once married to Daniel Romalotti, Nick's nephew through Phyllis, has ties to Phyllis that would inevitably become complicated if she and Nick were to start dating. For Phyllis, who remains one of Nick's most passionate and tumultuous exes, is not the kind of woman who would sit quietly and allow her former lover to build a romance with her ex-daughter-in-law. And even if she tried to act indifferent at first, fans know Phyllis too well to believe she could resist meddling, which means any Nick and Lily pairing would come with a built-in antagonist in Phyllis Summers, whose ability to stir up drama is both her curse and her gift to the show. And then there's Devon, Lily's fiercely protective brother, who has been a constant anchor in her life and who would not, under any circumstances, easily accept Nick Newman as his sister's new love interest. Not because Nick isn't respectable but because Devon has seen firsthand how Nick's entanglements with Sharon, Phyllis, Chelsea, and countless others often leave a trail of heartbreak, indecision, and complication, and Devon, who has already shouldered the burden of loss and responsibility within the Winters family, would see Nick as yet another man who could destabilize Lily's life at a time when she deserves peace, loyalty, and someone who is wholly hers. This is where the fan debate takes root. Can Nick ever truly give his whole self to any woman when he has spent decades torn between Sharon and Phyllis, the two women who continue to define him whether he admits it or not, and when Sharon has just recently shared some warm, rekindled moments with him? Isn't the specter of Sharon plus Nick, always hovering, threatening to undo any progress he makes with someone new? Some fans argue that Nick is best paired with Phyllis because with her, he is more authentic, more passionate, less restrained, while others argue that Sharon is his heart's true home, the one woman he will always circle back to. But in Lily, there is an entirely different possibility, one that doesn't simply rehash old patterns but instead offers him the chance to grow into a version of himself that isn't tethered to history. Yet, ironically, it is the shared history of their families that makes a Lily and Nick romance so precarious, because Victor Newman would either be amused or enraged by his son's connection to Lily, perhaps even both at the same time, and fans know Victor never stays out of his children's love lives for long, while the Winters family legacy looms large over Lily, who is not just a woman looking for love but a representation of one of the most respected families in Genoa city history. So her pairing with a Newman would carry more weight than just whether the two characters share chemistry. It would be about bridging or fracturing two soap dynasties that have always operated in parallel but rarely intertwined in romance. Still, many can't ignore that in soap storytelling, tragedy often paves the way for unexpected romance. And if Lily continues to grieve her losses while Nick finds himself once again caught in the Newman family's never-ending whirlwind, perhaps a moment of vulnerability, a moment of shared pain, could bring them together in a way that is both organic and believable. And yes, fans do recall those early chemistry test scenes, the bar encounter, the subtle flirtations, the almost kiss that never materialized. And they can't help but wonder if the show missed an opportunity back then to explore a relationship that might have shifted the balance of power in Genoa City, because pairing Lily with Nick wouldn't just be about romance, it would be about shaking up expectations, pushing characters out of their comfort zones, and forcing the audience to re-evaluate what they think they know about who belongs with whom, which is precisely why some fans are adamantly against the pairing, insisting that Lily has been through enough betrayals, enough half-hearted romances, enough men who couldn't or wouldn't fully commit, and the last thing she needs is Nick Newman, who, whether through his own choices or simply by virtue of being a Newman, has a track record of dividing his loyalty, of never being entirely free from Sharon or Phyllis, of always carrying ghosts of past loves into the present, which means the question at the heart of this debate isn't just whether Nick and Lily could have chemistry but whether Nick could ever give Lily his whole self, his undivided attention, his loyalty, his commitment, because Lily, more than anyone, deserves nothing less than that. Yet for all the rational arguments against them, the allure remains, the spark that was tested years ago, the notion of two families colliding, the promise of new storytelling avenues, and the simple soap opera truth that sometimes the most unexpected pairings become the most addictive. And so as fans weigh in, calling the idea boring, terrible, or exciting, one thing is clear: Nick and Lily as a couple would not be ignored. It would be talked about, debated, dissected, and relived in every forum from Reddit to Twitter to fan pages, because love stories in Genoa City aren't just about two characters, they are about legacies, loyalties, betrayals, and the eternal question of whether someone can truly give their whole self to another when their heart, their past, and their family obligations remain so divided. And in Nick and Lily's case, that question is perhaps more tantalizing, and more impossible, than ever. If we're to imagine a world where Lily Winters actually decides to give Nick Newman her whole self, it becomes necessary to explore what whole self even means in the language of soap operas. Because on the surface it suggests a commitment, a leap of faith, a willingness to open up without hesitation. But for Lily this is not a simple thing, as her entire romantic history has been painted by betrayal, infidelity, loss, and shattered trust, from her ill-fated marriages to Kane Ashby, where loyalty was constantly tested and secrets hovered like storm clouds, to her complicated feelings about Daniel Romalotti, who not only shares a past with her but links her to Phyllis Summers, a woman who is one of Nick's most defining exes. So the second Lily even contemplates falling for Nick, she is also taking on his messy, unavoidable baggage with Sharon and Phyllis, two women who will forever be woven into Nick's identity. And yet, soaps thrive on baggage, on characters who cannot simply leave their past behind, which makes the pairing of Nick and Lily both dangerous and intoxicating, because their romance could only succeed if the writers dared to tackle that baggage head-on, turning the very thing that makes them complicated into the very thing that keeps viewers glued to the screen, watching to see whether Lily can withstand the pull of Nick's divided heart, and whether Nick can resist the urge to fall back into old habits, particularly where Sharon is concerned, since Sharon and Nick's recent attempts to reconnect have already stirred up nostalgic memories for longtime fans of Chic, while Phyllis lingers in the background as the ever-dramatic, unpredictable force who would rather sabotage than allow Nick to find happiness in the arms of a woman she once viewed as family. But let's not ignore the other dominoes that would fall if Nick and Lily actually went for it. Devon Hamilton would be the first to bristle, and his reaction could form the backbone of a riveting family versus family storyline, because Devon has never been one to bite his tongue when it comes to protecting Lily, and if he perceives Nick as yet another Newman swooping in with half-hearted promises, his anger could ignite a Winters versus Newman feud that Genoa City has never truly seen before, a feud that could rival the Abbott-Newman wars of the past, with Victor Newman inevitably inserting himself to either endorse or destroy the match, depending on his mood, his business needs, or his personal grudges, and that's where things get even more fascinating. Victor could see Lily as a stabilizing influence on Nick, someone who might ground his son in a way Sharon and Phyllis never could, and in that case, Victor could become an unlikely supporter, praising Lily's poise, intelligence, and loyalty to family, but just as easily, he could interpret the relationship as a distraction from Newman business, a weakening of the Newman name, or even a betrayal of loyalty to Sharon, whom Victor has often defended as being Nick's true partner. And if Victor ever did turn on Lily, the ripple effect would be devastating, because Lily isn't the type to cower in the face of Victor's intimidation, yet she also isn't reckless. Instead, she would attempt to rise above, to prove herself through strength of character, and in doing so, she could become both a threat and a challenge to Victor's power, perhaps even earning his respect in the process, though the road there would be messy, bitter, and filled with manipulation. And then there's the question of Kane Ashby, who, though not currently active in the canvas, could easily be reintroduced into the storyline as a ghost of Lily's past, a man who could swoop in and try to remind her of what they once had, sparking insecurities in Nick, who has always bristled when compared to men from his partner's pasts, and that jealousy, layered atop the insecurities Sharon and Phyllis would deliberately poke, could fracture the romance before it even had a chance to stabilize, unless Lily and Nick were willing to confront those insecurities together, which itself would be a fascinating arc, seeing whether they could trust each other enough to withstand outside forces. The age difference and family connections also remain sore spots for fans, with many pointing out that Lily once shared a friendship with Cassie, Nick's late daughter, and while soaps often bend reality and time to create drama, this particular history makes some viewers uncomfortable, which is why the show, if it chose to go this route, would need to carefully craft the story in a way that honors Cassie's legacy rather than glossing over it, perhaps even incorporating Sharon's perspective, as she, more than anyone, would carry the weight of Cassie's memory, and her reaction to Nick dating Lily could be one of the most emotionally charged beats in the entire arc. Would Sharon see it as a betrayal, a dishonouring of Cassie's memory, or would she recognize it as two people finding solace in each other, both of whom she loves in different ways, thereby reluctantly blessing the union even as it pains her? And while Sharon's response would set the emotional tone, Phyllis's response would set the dramatic one, because Phyllis has never been one to sit quietly on the sidelines, and her disapproval of Nick and Lily would come in fiery, manipulative, possibly destructive bursts, with schemes, accusations, and maybe even outright sabotage, whether through business or personal attacks, because in her mind, Lily isn't just some random woman. She is her ex-daughter-in-law, the ex-wife of her son, which creates an almost taboo dynamic that Phyllis would weaponize mercilessly. Beyond these interpersonal fireworks, a Nick and Lily pairing could also reshape the business landscape of Genoa City, as Lily's role in Chancellor Winters would inevitably intersect with Nick's ties to Newman Enterprises and possibly New Hope, creating opportunities for collaboration, competition, or betrayal that extend beyond romance and into the boardroom. And if there's one thing soaps thrive on as much as love triangles, it's corporate wars laced with personal vendettas, which means this pairing could kill two birds with one stone, reigniting the Winters family's prominence in business storylines while keeping Nick enmeshed in his perpetual struggle to define himself outside Victor's shadow. And let's not overlook the fan nostalgia at play, because for many, the reason this conversation even exists is the faint memory of those chemistry test scenes years ago, when Nick and Lily were allowed a few moments of screen time that hinted at something intriguing, something simmering just below the surface, only for the writers to drop it and never return, leaving fans to speculate about what could have been. And in soaps, the what if is often just as powerful as the what is, which is why resurrecting this idea now, years later, when both characters are older, wiser, and more wounded, could be even more compelling, because it's no longer about youthful flirtation but about two people who know the cost of love, who know what it means to lose, to rebuild, to compromise, and who might, against all odds, see in each other the possibility of something different, something unexpected, something whole. But then we return to the question at the heart of it all. Could Nick ever truly give Lily his whole self, when his history suggests he is perpetually divided, perpetually torn, perpetually unable to let go of Sharon or Phyllis, perpetually carrying the weight of being Victor's son, and when Lily, after everything she's endured, deserves nothing less than a man who is all in, who doesn't just dabble in affection but commits fully, fiercely, unconditionally? Fans are right to be skeptical, right to call the idea terrible, boring, or doomed, but they are also right to be intrigued, to remember the sparks, to imagine the drama, because in Genoa City, love is rarely about logic, it is about tension, spectacle, emotion, and the endless dance between loyalty and betrayal. And on that front, Nick and Lily, whether as a couple or as a missed opportunity, will always have a place in the what-if conversations that keep fans talking long after the credits roll. If the show truly wanted to test whether Nick and Lily could sustain a romance beyond a fleeting moment of chemistry, it would need to throw them into a crucible that forces both characters to confront their deepest fears and most entrenched habits. And that crucible would almost certainly take the form of external opposition layered with internal doubt. Because Lily, despite her grace and resilience, still carries scars from Kane's betrayals, Hillary's death, and the many family crises that have defined her life, while Nick, no matter how much he tries to reinvent himself as the steady, dependable Newman sibling, has a long-standing pattern of splitting his loyalties, of trying to play protector to Sharon, mediator to Phyllis, and dutiful son to Victor all at once, which often leaves him with little left to give to his partner. So if Lily were to give Nick her whole self, the question isn't only whether he could reciprocate but whether she would lose herself in the process, because Lily has always been strongest when she is standing on her own, managing her own business interests, leading her family, and carving her place in Genoa City, and fans would justifiably be wary of a romance that reduced her to being a Newman accessory. Yet if the writers leaned into this tension, the story could become about Lily refusing to be diminished, demanding Nick rise to her level of commitment and independence rather than settling for the crumbs of his attention. And that dynamic could actually create the kind of powerful, balanced pairing that fans crave but rarely get. Because instead of Lily being another notch in Nick's complicated love history, she could be the woman who finally challenges him to stop running back to Sharon or Phyllis whenever life gets messy, to stop hiding in Victor's shadow, and to start showing up fully, consistently, and without reservation. And this storyline could be even more charged if the show allowed the Winters family to step fully into the conflict, with Devon outright forbidding the relationship at first, citing Nick's history, only to eventually find himself reluctantly respecting Nick if he proves his loyalty to Lily, while Victor could swing wildly between supportive and dismissive depending on how the relationship impacts Newman Enterprises. Sharon could grapple with feelings of betrayal as Cass's memory is invoked in unexpected ways, and Phyllis could go on a full-blown crusade to dismantle Lick, as fans have nicknamed them, before it gains traction, using her trademark mix of manipulation, seduction, and chaos, all of which would put Lily and Nick in the hot seat, forcing them to decide whether they are strong enough to withstand the storm or destined to become just another failed experiment in Genoa City's long list of almost couples. In the end, the brilliance of a Nick and Lily pairing lies not in its obviousness but in its improbability, because soaps thrive when fans are divided, when half the audience cries terrible idea and the other half insists this could be magic, when the mere suggestion of a romance provokes heated debates on Reddit and Twitter, when viewers recall chemistry test scenes from years ago and argue over whether sparks were real or imagined, and when the question of whether one character can ever give their whole self to another becomes more than just a line of dialogue but the central theme of an entire arc, because in Nick and Lily's case, the answer isn't simple. Maybe he can, maybe he can't, maybe she shouldn't risk it, maybe she should, maybe the show will explore it, maybe it won't. But the mere act of fans still asking, still wondering, still debating, proves that the idea has power, and in the unpredictable, endlessly cyclical world of soap operas, that power is often all it takes to turn a what if into a what's next.